Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to useful tips for the airbrush beginner. Now I've sort of sat in the chair at home today and I thought, right, I'm going to do a little tips video for a beginner because I've done other videos where I've said about air pressures and paint mixes. And I was thinking last night with a clear mind, if you've seen my other video, the one before this one that's on the channel, you'll sort of like, if you watch that, you'll see what I'm dealing with. Now, there is going to be another video on that because I've sort of had a light switch moment with my diagnosis and what to take. So coming in the studio this morning and thinking of this video for beginners, it's sort of refreshed my mind on, I think, what's the best way to set up and run your brush as a beginner when you're sort of learning. And my other videos have been slightly different, saying you need a ballpark pressure of this to begin with. So I'm going to give you a little sort of a little demo test on a running with some paint. I'll show you a little bit of a paint mix, a few little tips and tricks just to get you sort of started, to ease your mind into it, because if you're, a lot of beginners go gung-ho into airbrushing. They see these videos, they see the custom paint work out there, and they sort of like, whoa, let's go, bull at the gate. Now, my mind and the way I've been painting for the last 15 years has been that process. And stepping back and now slowing my mind rate down to what it should be, it's like, whoa, now I'm looking forward to painting again, because now I can proper home in the skills that I've learned a fast way and now translate that to a slow way. So I want to give you like the slowed down version of the Dred effects tips, useful tips for a beginner. So when it comes to your brush, I've said in my previous videos about running pressure. Now it's like 25 ballpark. And most airbrush channels will say to you, for a beginner, 25 psi ballpark. Now that is 25 psi. Now that is a lot of pressure to pump paint out at in an airbrush. Now airbrush were designed back in the day for photo retouching up photos and things like that, and real small tight illustration stuff. Now running that, doing photo retouching at 25 psi is like, no, there's no way on this planet you would go up to a piece of artwork or retouching a photograph at 25 psi. It's just way too fierce. It really is. And I think practicing for a beginner running that sort of air pressure, as I say, it's just gung-ho and it's just balls out too much. I really do think it's too much. Just poof. I think the best way to learn with one of these is down on your pressure, is right down on your pressure and really thinned out on your paints, so it slows you down. You get to master your trigger, slow down a little bit, and then as you progress, if you need that 25, there is a time and a place for that. For that sort of pressure, and it isn't when you're painting sort of quite close, because with the airbrush you're usually always up close. There's times where you're backing off to put wider spray down or you're shading, but it's very rare you're painting this sort of distance away, a foot to 2 feet away. It's very rare. You're sort of usually always sort of up close. Everybody's sort of up close with the brush, 2-3 inches, an inch away, even down to like 3 or 4 millimeters away from the paper. So I think a ballpark setting for your pressure would be around, I'm going to say 10 psi. Give it a try, guys, at 10 psi on your brush. So just dial your air pressure in on your main line, drop it at 10 and just see how that sounds at 10. Yeah. It's not really blowing back off your hand. It's nice. You can feel the air and you think, yeah, at 25, you can just feel that force coming back. So dial it down to 10, and then we're going to move on to paints. Now, when you look at airbrush paints, genuine airbrush paints that are made for the airbrush, like your Createx Illustration, it's a quality paint. It's one I'd recommend. FW inks, because you can go down the ink route, and I'm really enjoying inks at the minute. Inks is another, it is meant for an airbrush, because on the side of the bottle it shows you ink pens, things like that. It shows you a little diagram of an airbrush, so it's the consistency for an airbrush. Golden high flow acrylics, airbrush paint. Wicked colours, airbrush paint. If you stick to them sort of brands and go for this from the off, yes, you can buy, and I've said in the past, you can buy your cheap artist acrylics and thin them down. But at the end of the day, it's stressful, you got to keep going through your thinning process. If you go for a ballpark airbrush paint to start off with, one that is basically the consistency to spray at that little higher bit of pressure, so I'd say ballpark, all of these will easily spray at 25, will easily spray right down to sort of 20, 15, but we want to go a little bit lower than that. So once you get these brands here, you can then thin them. Now, thinning Createx Illustration, 1 drop of Createx Illustration to 1 drop of water, go 1 to 1. FW inks, we can go 1 to 1. Golden, you can go 1 to 1. Wicked, you can go 1 drop of Wicked. I would say with the Wicked, go 3 drops of reducer with that, because that is a little bit thicker bodied. So if you're in that sort of ballpark of thinning, try that mix at 10 psi. If it comes through grainy at 10 psi, keep your brush at 10, and then just add another drop of water to the Createx, another bit of reducer to your FW. I'm going to use isopropanol with that because I really like that with that mix. With your golden, drop another couple more drops of water, and just have a play at, set your brush at a permanent PSI, and then start thinning your paint down to that PSI level. Once you get that nice flow where you see the atomization very soft, you know you're good to go, and you'll find you'll have a little bit more control with your brush running low PSI. When you're running 20 PSI, I think it instantly puts you into that false sense of security where you've got to, you can hear it, it's fierce, it's fast, so you've got to move fast really quick because that paint's just going to go everywhere, and you tend to just blast loads and loads and loads of paint down. Now, another reason why I say that is as well, these images you see on the easel just here, I'll do a zoom in on these in a minute. These were painted at around 9 to 10 psi on all 3 of these. Now, there is no way on this planet someone will be able to paint that at 25 psi, the details and the size of them at that sort of size. Now, painting these for me was very enjoyable, painting it at low psi. It's just really nice. Now, a lot of beginners, and this is one other thing why I say 25 psi is too fierce, too fast, too much, it's too intense. And it sends you into that false sense of security with a brush because you hammer the paint down. And a lot of beginners, if they were going to paint that, they want to see the results quick. And running these high pressures and trying to achieve something like that, you tend to blast the paint down because you want to see that finished result quick. You want to see that eye completed quick. You want to see that shape. Blast all the paint down, there it is in one solid line. I've got that bit in. But then when you stand back and look at that, it just looks one tone all the way across because you've hammered that paint down so quick to create that shape or create that form in that piece of artwork. It's just too much. So going this way about it, where you're going 10 psi, thin paint, you've got more control. It's, when you think about it and look at what you're doing, it's slowing you down and you're building the layers up. And airbrushing is about building them layers up, drop your first tone down. To create that rolled off shape, you drop the next tone and the next tone and the next tone. And that's how these were achieved. And this is, in my eyes, this is really nice work that I've done. You've got the real nice soft tones, you've got the darks, and I've just built these layers up, and this is running 10 psi. And I think for a beginner, have a go at, if you want to master your brush and your trigger and get comfortable a lot quicker with it and enjoy it more, just come down on your pressure, come down to 10. Try your brush at 10 psi, thin your paints out to the consistency where they atomize. You will hear the brush at 10 psi as well. You'll hear it more so at low pressure, your paint consistency, how it paints and how it sounds. If you've got a thick paint at low psi, it will sound really choked and spitty. You want it to be, when you hear 10 psi, you want it to sound like that when it's putting paint out. It wants to be that same tone as that air coming out. That's how the sound you want it at 10 psi with that paint mix. If that paint mix was too thick, you wouldn't get that nice sound you hear now. It would just sound choked and spitty, and then you would see it. You'd see it on your panel that I say, always put a panel to the side of you when you're doing your artwork. You would see it in that graininess. It's getting that real soft, smooth paint. And as I say, brushes were designed for doing like photo retouching. So if you're looking at a photograph, you don't want to be blasting spitty, grainy paint at it to blend things and retouch photos. You want that real soft atomization, and they run very low pressure because you want minimal overspray going across your work. So I just think running low pressure for a beginner, give it a try. Start off on your low pressure. As I say, there's always a time and a place for running 25, 30 psi. I think your higher pressures are for when you're sort of basing something up, priming something up with the airbrush. You want to get a bit of base coat down, you're backing off, you're doing a piece of artwork where you've got a background where you're sort of filling a big area up, like say you're doing the sky and you're going to put clouds in. You want to get that tone of say blue running across. You want that higher psi to get more of that paint out, to get a wider spray and fill that area up quick. But a lot of people, a lot of beginners they're either going down the miniature model route where you're painting miniatures. And a lot of that is with the airbrush, it's not so much you're putting in details with an airbrush when it comes to miniatures, because you're using brushes, you're using a lot of other tools. It's not all done with an airbrush on a miniature. It really isn't, because you can't get in all these little places in a miniature with an airbrush. It's basically priming, base coating, backing off, doing highlights and different effects and highlights and things like that. When you're doing, say you're a permanent portrait painter, or photorealism sort of painter, you are right up close and you are backing off with that brush. So you are working that brush, higher pressures, lower pressures. You're utilising all the features on that brush when you're going down the photorealistic route, as well as using erasers and different sort of tools to get the job done. When you take it across to the automotive side of things, you're basically doing exactly the same as what you do as in, say, you're a photorealistic airbrusher, but you're just doing it on a different substrate. You're working on a gas tank, or you're working on a car. It's the same thing, but you're just doing the same process but on a different sort of panel. It's on automotive, bikes, tanks, things like that. You're not working on paper, you're working on a smooth surface. So you adjust your pressure accordingly. Working on paper, canvases and things like that, they're a little bit more forgiving on a canvas surface and on a paper surface that's porous, because you can work them pressures a little bit higher, because the paint's going to hit it and it's going to absorb. So learning to run low pressure with a thin paint, low pressure I think will benefit you across the board, whether you're doing it on sort of paper, because it just running these at low pressure on absorbed paper, it is so nice to work with. It really is. It's just like you just enjoy it because you've not got that risk of it blowing out. It's going to hit that paper, nice absorbent paper at low pressure, and you just paint, you enjoy it. If you're running on synthetic papers, that's sort of like you're closest to automotive. So low pressure again, going up with the synthetic paper, low pressures, you can get the paint down, slows you down. Same as automotive, you're sort of low pressure. Paint mix just right, low pressure, so you don't get that blowout. So it's not pushing that paint away from the panel or spreading it across. So I'll move in closer. I will show you these pictures a little bit up closer and you'll see what I mean by details and how down these pieces of artwork are and the details that are in them. So I'll zoom in on that and then we'll do some, I'm going to mix a bit of paint up and I'll show you how nice it is to work at 10 psi and just going up close on a piece of paper. So they're the images, guys. Now these images, when you look at my hand to this, my finger is bigger than that eye that's in here. This is like tiny little details, but this is running really low PSI, and this is what I'm on about, you building it up. It's quite an absorbent paper, this one, so a joy to work on that image there. And then you move across to that one, and that's the same, that's like done in ink, but really nice to work on. And then you've got that one there. I'll just bring that in a bit. Now you can see how small that is when you sort of hold an airbrush up to it. You're looking at that eye is like smaller than the crown cap. It's tiny on that image. And these little eyelashes and these little hairs that are in here, the hairs, all the hair textures here. This is working a monotone sepia, but just really thinned out paint, running really, really low, and just building the layers up, and you can get them results. Once you've mastered the art of this bit on that trigger where you're moving this trigger, once you've mastered that, all these pieces, to a beginner it's like, oh my god, how am I going to paint that? How on earth do I paint that or that or that? But once you master your trigger and master your paint mix, bring your pressure down, all this artwork just becomes easy. After sort of years of going down the road, it sort of becomes easier and easier and easier. And then you know the ways to go around pieces of artwork, break pieces of artwork down. We all paint differently. Some people paint completely different to me. I'm not saying that this is the right way you should paint. You will always go your own path when it comes to your artwork and the way you paint. So we're moving a little bit closer. I'll get some blank paper and we'll just do a thinned out paint mix and run it at 10 psi. Right guys, we're going to do a little paint mix, simple one. Things that I'd recommend you get, nice, cheap and simple. Plastic mixing cups. Mix your paint, not in your airbrush. You can mix on the fly. When you get better later on down the line, you can just start mixing in the cup as you're on the fly painting. I do that, I can mix in the cup, back bubble it and just keep painting. But that's when you sort of get a little bit more experience and you get used to mixing in the cup on your brush. So buy yourself some little plastic pots, nice and simple. Now we're going to we'll do a Createx illustration mix. So always shake your paints up. If you've got strainers, yes, strain them if you've got them. Now this paint is thin. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 drops to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a 1-to-1. That's the consistency on a 1-to-1 with Createx illustration. That's how I would mix that paint, because that paint flows really nice in the airbrush. It will flow straight out the bottle in the airbrush, but if you want to tweak it, distill water or tap water, that's it. Drop that straight in that paint, you are good to go. Now the brush we're using is the Galleria Mobius on a 02. So we've got that 25, crown cap off, and we're going to drop that paint in this brush. So 5 drops of Createx illustration to 5 drops of water. So now what we're going to do is drop that pressure down. Can you hear that? How nice that brush sounds, that like high-pitched whistle with the paint going through. I just know that's going to spray nice. It doesn't sound grainy coming out the brush, and you will hear this when you put your paint through. If it's too thick, it'll be like, it sounds like your brush has got bronchitis. It was like it wants to cough up a big chunk of something out of your lung. It sounds like that noise, but this sounds really good. So let's move in and we'll do a few passes with the Createx illustration. So hopefully that's picking that up. Pull that through. Now this is 10 psi with that brush. Now we all do these lines in these, see all these videos on YouTube where they go lines, detail, detail. Now, the best way to see if your brush is atomising your paint right is to back off to about 2 or 3 inches. Back off and put a pass of paint down and look at that spray pattern. Now that, at that consistency, that's atomising that nice. It's probably a little bit grainy at that because we're running low pressure. So I'm going to go for 2 more drops of water. I'll back bubble that. And to back bubble your airbrush, you basically take your, you can do it with the crown cap on with this brush. You put your finger over the front and that just forces the air to go back up. And you'll just do that. You see the bubbles coming out the top? That's what you call back bubbling, where you can mix your paint in the cup. So I'll thin this down a little bit more. Drop that pressure. Now that is better. Now you can see that, how light that is, how nice atomised it is on that paper. So when you go up now with this brush, now you can see why thinning your paint down and running low pressure is very nice to work with. And this is why I'm saying when you're doing sort of photo retouching, you don't want to be blasting 25 psi now because you're not going to get these results at 25 psi, say with this paint mix. It's all about sort of slowing the pace down, dropping the pressure down, getting that nice sound. You hear that? Just sounds nice and sweet, like that brush is whistling. And that's what you want. And you'll get these super fine lines with ease with a brush. This is a 02. And that is spraying that paint absolutely spot on. And you'll find your brush will perform better as well. It releases the paint better. It can make a cheap brush feel like a £200 brush, and that's a cheap brush. It's not an expensive brush, but it performs absolutely like a £200 to £300 brush you've got in your hand. I mean, that's really nice atomisation, really good details, little tiny dagger strokes. So working this pressure and that mix is how I got them pictures down. 25 psi, you can see what I mean? There's no way you're going to go 25 psi and create that. It's just like, it's just not happening. It really isn't. So there's a time and a place for 25, and it's when you're backing off and you're doing this and you're getting that nice bit of background. But I don't think there's one beginner on the planet that is painting like this. They all want this up close, because whenever you see airbrush work, it's all detailed. Look at the detail in that work. Look at that, what someone's achieved. And they all instantly aim to get this. They want this straight off the bat. And I think the quickest way of learning to get these nice tight little details is lowering that pressure, bring it down, and then going in, and you just hit it. The brush, I think airbrushes run better like this. They run really nice. They just come alive when you just dial that paint right in and drop that pressure down. I just think it makes it nicer to work with, a brush in your hand, running these nice low pressures, because you can just puff that little bit of paint in, backing off 2 or 3 inches. You can just really drop them little bits of paint where you want them. And it's a lot less stressful running low pressure than if you were running this 25 and going, I need to drop a little bit of paint there. Oh, it's all or nothing. It's too fierce, it's too much. It's the brush is wanting to pump out loads and loads of paint. But when you dial it in, you can just tickle that trigger and drop a little bit of paint in. And that's what it's about. Drop that little bit of paint in and build the picture up. Don't be gung-ho on a piece of artwork when you're beginning, because you want to see the results like this. Everybody wants to see results quick. They see a portrait and it's like bang. And this is where you'll see a lot of beginners artwork where they go too dark too quick, and it's because they want to see the result very, very fast. So they hammer the paint on. And if they're using black, they go in on things and it just looks too dark on some picture. Too dark too quick. It's all about building the layers up. It's all about working like this, nice and light, that soft atomization, them soft transitions, and learning to put your softs where you need them and your sharp edges where you need them. So if you are starting out, we all have budgets. I do understand that when it comes to brushes and it comes to paint, compressors. You can start with the budget brush. I mean, this thing will achieve this with ease, with a decent paint, the right mix, your compressor. You can have any compressor, whether you've got a 200 litre one that's outside or you've got a little standalone compressor in your studio. Just bring that pressure down. 10 psi, thin your paint down, and you'll just feel a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more sort of, I wouldn't say less nervous going in on something running low pressure, because it's just slowing your thought process down that little bit. It's the first thing you're slowing down is the tool that's in your hand. You're slowing it down, you're dialing it back, you're restricting it, you're bringing it down, so you instantly go slower. When you slow something down, your mind goes a bit slower and your movement will also become slower with that movement that you're doing, because you're overlaying it and building it up layer and layer and layer. And I think that's the best way to start learning, guys, is that way. Give it a try. As I say, there is always a time and a place for higher pressures. So I hope this has helped you out. There is loads and loads of things to learn. There really is. When it comes to this sort of art, yes, there's dagger strokes, there's dots, there's different dagger strokes for shading, but all this will come in time. I think have a go, just give it a go. Drop your comments, give it a go. After this video's up, give it a go, drop your comments and tell me your thoughts on running as a beginner with a semi-decent airbrush paint, if you've got any of these ones that I've got on the table. I'll run over the mix again. If you're running illustration, mix it 1:1 or go 2:1. So 1 drop of illustration to 2 drops. This is Payne's Grey. This is a transparent, so it's thin anyway. So, and that's thinning it again. So go 1 drop of paint, 2 drops of water, or 3 drops of water, 10 psi. When it comes to golden, I would go golden on this, running low pressure. I would probably go 1 drop of golden to say 2 drops of water again, or 3. Try it that way. When it comes to the Wicked, this Wicked is the new version, so it's not the old one. This one I find, personally, mix this straight with isopropanol alcohol, which is the 99.9% isoprop. You can get this eBay and Amazon. It's dead easy to source this one. You get 98, 97, it'll all do the similar sort of thing. So I mix the Wicked, I'll go 1 drop of Wicked to about, I've done mixes in the past to say 10 to 20 drops of ISO in it. So it really thins it out, and try that way. FW inks, I find the mixes that I've been using on the FW inks, you can use FW ink straight out the bottle, but I think it's a little bit too dense if you're running low pressure. The brush needs to be sitting at around 20 psi for FW inks to go through it and sort of a consistent flow. But if you mix FW inks, go 1 drop of ink to 2 drops of water, and then drop your ISO in after the water. So mix your 2 drops of water in with like 1 drop of ink, mix that in, and then say go 10 drops of isopropanol with it, drop that in, mix it up, and then try your FW inks. And the flow on it is incredible, it really is. It just, the alcohol just sort of makes it solidify more and breaks it down and just makes it, you'll see it when you mix it in one of these pots. When you mix isopropanol in it, because water is more dense than alcohol, when you mix it with your paint, you do this, it just looks silky. It just swirls around in the mixing pot really silky, and that's what you want. And that's when you can start really hitting these real fine, tight details with ease with a brush. You are literally just pressing that trigger down, and you're just thinking of moving back, and that paint is there, it's on point, because it's just so nice to flow through the brush. You'll find that, and you'll hit your details that you want. So them sort of paint mixes, if you're using them, give it a try, tell me your thoughts. Just have a little sort of a Sunday afternoon little practice piece, do some lines and little dot work, and just see how your brush performs at 10 psi with a real thin mix, and let me know how you get on with it, because I think you'll find you'll enjoy it a lot more running a real thin mix at low psi than running 25 psi trying to go 2 inches off the panel and paint something. It's like, that's where you're going to get your problems. That's where you're going to hit your mistakes a lot faster using your airbrush that way than running low psi, thinned out paint and going in and just give it a try. So I hope this has helped you out, guys. I'm not going to leave any links because the paints they're easy to source. You can just type in Golden High Flow Acrylics, FW inks, Wicked Colours, it's another Createx one, and Createx Illustration. They are, I would say, your main airbrush brands that a lot of people use, and they work, and they're easy to thin down. They're the mixing ratios that I've just showed you, so you'll get along fine. And it doesn't matter what brush you've got. You could have the Galleria Mobius 02, 03. You could have the new Ultra as a beginner. Try the Ultra with low paint, thinned out paint, pressured down. You'll just see how that brush comes alive on a 045. We'll hit that easily with a 045. You'll be like, oh my god, I can't believe this brush can do this. But it's just getting your paint mixes and your air pressures right. Once you've got that dialed in, and you know, the rest of it will just come a lot quicker. These are little hurdles that you get through for a start with your brush when you're first starting out, and can be very frustrating for people right from the beginning, and can continue on if you don't master this bit first and dial it in. So give it a try, drop your comments. I'm going to go in because it's just started raining. I'm going to get soaked on the way back to the house. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for all your comments that you put on the channel and on yesterday's video on what I'm going through. There's going to be another one on this because I've got loads more to tell you relating to that other video. Sort of like a light bulb moment that's just gone like that for me, and it's like, oh my God, and I'm thinking back past again. But that's going to be in the next video. Thanks again. Cheers.